A man called me from my wife's phone and said, "She told me to let you know she won't be coming home because she's moving in with me today." I was standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store when my wife's phone number lit up my screen. It was 11:30 on a Saturday morning, and I'd left her at home an hour earlier saying she was going to catch up on laundry and maybe take a bath. I almost didn't answer because she usually just texted if she needed me to grab something, but something made me swipe to accept the call. The voice that came through wasn't hers. It was a man's voice, smooth and casual, like he was calling to confirm a dinner reservation. "Hey, this is Kyle. Listen, Rebecca told me to give you a call and let you know she won't be coming home because she's moving in with me today." I stood there holding a box of granola, staring at the shelves without seeing them. The words didn't make sense in the order he'd said them. "What?" was all I could manage. "Yeah, she's here with me now. We've been seeing each other for a while, and she decided it's time to make it official. She wanted me to tell you so you wouldn't worry when she doesn't come home." His tone was matter-of-fact, almost friendly, like he was doing me a favor. I looked at my phone screen to confirm it really was Rebecca's number. It was. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, but my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. "No joke, man. Look, I know this is probably a shock, but Rebecca and I have been together for about 8 months now. She's been trying to figure out how to tell you, and we finally decided it was better to just rip the Band-Aid off." My hand tightened on the shopping cart handle. 8 months. I calculated backward in my head while this stranger named Kyle kept talking. 8 months ago was February, right after Valentine's Day, which we'd spent at that Italian restaurant downtown where Rebecca had seemed distracted through dinner. I'd thought she was stressed about her job. Kyle was still talking. "She's packing up her stuff from your place now. She said to tell you she'll be back tomorrow to get the rest of her things when you're at work. She doesn't want a big confrontation." I abandoned my cart in the middle of the aisle and headed for my car, phone pressed to my ear. "Put Rebecca on the phone, right now." There was a pause, then muffled voices in the background. Kyle came back on. "She doesn't want to talk right now. She said everything she needs to say is in the letter she left you on the kitchen counter." I was already in my car, keys shaking in my hand as I tried to get them in the ignition. "If she's at my house right now, she can talk to me on her own phone instead of having you call me like some kind of messenger service." Kyle sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Look, I'm just trying to help make this easier for everyone. She's not at your house anymore. She's here, at my place. She went over this morning while you were out to grab some essentials. The rest, she'll get tomorrow." The 12-minute drive home felt like an hour. I kept the call going, asking Kyle questions that he answered with disturbing casualness. Where did they meet? At a professional networking event for real estate agents. What did he do for work? He owned a property development company. Where did he live? A condo downtown with a view of the river. Every answer was delivered in the same conversational tone, like we were two acquaintances catching up. He even asked me how I was holding up, which made me want to throw my phone out the window. When I pulled into our driveway, Rebecca's car was gone. The house key was in my hand, but the front door was already unlocked, which we never did. I pushed it open and called her name anyway, knowing she wouldn't answer. The silence that came back felt heavier than it should have. Kyle was still on the phone. "She's not there, man. I told you, she's with me." I hung up on him and walked through our house like it was a crime scene. The living room looked normal. Kitchen looked normal. Then I saw the envelope on the counter, my name written in Rebecca's handwriting across the front. I picked it up but didn't open it yet. Instead, I went upstairs to our bedroom. Her side of the closet was noticeably emptier. Not completely cleaned out, but her favorite clothes were gone. The dresser drawers hung open with gaps where her things used to be. Her toiletries were missing from the bathroom. The jewelry box I'd given her for our 5th anniversary was gone from the dresser. I sat on the edge of our bed and opened the envelope. The letter was typed, not handwritten, which felt wrong somehow, like she couldn't even be bothered to write it by hand. It was 3 paragraphs of explaining that she'd been unhappy for a long time, that we'd grown apart, that she'd met someone who understood her better. She hoped we could handle the divorce amicably. She'd already contacted a lawyer. She'd be in touch about dividing assets. The words were so generic, they could have been copied from a template online. There was nothing personal in them, nothing that referenced our actual relationship or the 7 years we'd spent together. I read it 3 times trying to find something real in it, but it was like reading a business memo about terminating a contract. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca's number. "I know this is hard. Take some time to process. We can talk in a few days." I called her number immediately. Kyle answered again. "She's not ready to talk yet." I kept my voice level through pure force of will. "Tell Rebecca that if she wants a divorce, she can tell me herself, face to face, not through her boyfriend on the phone and a printed letter." More muffled conversation in the background. Then Kyle said, "She says she'll meet you tomorrow afternoon at the coffee shop on 7th Street, 3 o'clock. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in my empty house trying to make sense of what had just happened in the span of an hour. This morning I'd been married to someone I thought I knew. Now I was apparently getting divorced from a stranger who sent her new boyfriend to break the news. I called my best friend Nathan, who answered on the second ring with his usual cheerful greeting that died when he heard my voice. "What's wrong?" I told him everything while pacing through the house. Nathan had been at our wedding, He'd helped me pick out the engagement ring. He'd been there through all of it, and now I was telling him it was over via a phone call from another man. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Then Nathan said, "What the actual hell?" It was validating to hear someone else express the shock I was feeling. "I'm coming over. Don't do anything until I get there." Nathan arrived 20 minutes later with his laptop and a determination to figure out what was happening. We sat at my kitchen table while I showed him the letter and replayed the conversation with Kyle. Nathan pulled up Rebecca's social media accounts on his computer. Her Facebook hadn't been updated in weeks. Instagram was mostly professional photos of houses she'd sold, nothing personal. LinkedIn showed she still listed herself as married to me. "Who is this Kyle guy?" Nathan asked, already typing. I realized I didn't know his last name. I called Rebecca's number again, and again Kyle answered. "What's your last name?" I asked without preamble. "Brennan. Kyle Brennan. Why?" I hung up and Nathan was already searching. Kyle Brennan owned Brennan Development Group, a mid-sized property development company that had been in business for about 6 years. His LinkedIn showed a professional headshot of a guy in his late 30s with dark hair and the kind of smile that probably worked well in sales meetings. He looked successful and put together, which somehow made it worse. Nathan scrolled through Kyle's social media. There were photos of construction projects, business events, a few pictures of him at charity fundraisers, nothing obviously personal, and definitely nothing with Rebecca. "He keeps his private life off social media," Nathan observed. "Smart if you're dating someone else's wife." I pulled up our bank accounts on my phone. Nothing looked unusual. No suspicious withdrawals or charges. Rebecca and I kept most of our money in joint accounts, and everything seemed normal. Recent purchases were groceries, gas, her car payment, my car payment, utilities. All the mundane expenses of a shared life that was apparently ending. "What about her phone records?" Nathan asked. I didn't have access to those. We'd kept separate phone plans even after getting married because it was cheaper. Nathan suggested I call the phone company and see what I could find out. I spent an hour on the phone with customer service getting nowhere because I wasn't the account holder and couldn't verify her security questions. They couldn't tell me anything without her permission. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Kyle's voice saying, 8 months, like it was nothing. 8 months of my wife coming home to me every night while living a completely separate life. 8 months of lying about where she was going and what she was doing. I'd trusted her completely, and that trust now felt like the stupidest thing I'd ever done. I got up at 5 a.m. and started going through our home office. Rebecca handled most of our filing, and I'd never had reason to question the system she'd set up. Now I pulled out every folder and looked at every document. Tax returns, insurance policies, mortgage papers, utility bills. Everything seemed in order. Too in order, actually. Nothing was out of place, which made me suspicious in a way I couldn't quite articulate. In a folder labeled Rebecca Personal, I found bank statements for an account I didn't know existed. It was in her name only, opened 3 years ago, with regular deposits of $500 every month. The current balance was just over $18,000. I photographed every page with my phone, hands shaking. Where was this money coming from? Our paychecks went into our joint account. I checked those statements again. Sure enough, every month there was a $500 withdrawal labeled Transfer to Savings. I'd never questioned it because we'd talked about building up savings, but this account wasn't in both our names like I'd assumed. It was hers alone, and I'd never seen the statements before now. I called Nathan back even though it was barely 6 a.m. He answered, sounding groggy but alert when he heard my voice. I told him about the secret account. "She's been planning this," Nathan said. "You don't hide money for 8 months unless you're planning an exit." That thought made my stomach turn. This wasn't a spontaneous decision to leave me for someone new. This was calculated, premeditated. I spent the rest of the morning searching through everything we owned. In the back of Rebecca's desk drawer, behind some old tax documents, I found a folder I'd never seen before. Inside were printed emails between Rebecca and someone named Kay. The emails went back 10 months, not 8. At first, they were professional, discussing properties and market trends. Then they got friendlier. Then they got flirtatious. Then they got explicit. I read through them all, each one feeling like a physical blow. Rebecca had sent these. My wife had written these things to another man while sleeping in the same bed as me. The emails referenced meetings at hotels, lunch dates that ran long, weekend getaways disguised as work conferences. I cross-referenced the dates with my own calendar. Every single one corresponded with the time Rebecca had told me she was doing something work-related. The real estate conference in March where she'd said no spouses were invited. The weekend training session in April. The client meetings that ran late every Thursday evening for months. All lies. All time spent with Kyle. There were also emails discussing their future together. Kyle wrote about how once she was free, they could build a life together. Rebecca responded that she just needed to time it right, to make sure she protected herself financially in the divorce. That phrase stuck in my head. Protect herself financially. From what? I was the higher earner. I'd always made more than Rebecca, which had never been an issue between us. We'd both contributed to our shared life according to our means. But reading her emails, it sounded like she was positioning herself as if she needed protection from me. Nathan came back over around noon with coffee and bagels that I couldn't eat. I showed him the emails, and he read through them with increasingly dark expressions. "She's been planning to divorce you and take as much as she can," he said. "These emails talk about assets like you're the enemy." I pulled up our joint account again and started going through transactions more carefully. There, buried among normal expenses, were cash withdrawals. $200 here, $300 there, always from ATMs, always getting lost in the general flow of spending. I added them up over the past year. Over $15,000 in cash withdrawals that I'd never noticed because they weren't large enough individually to raise flags. "Where did all that cash go?" Nathan asked. The secret savings account had $18,000, with only $500 deposits each month for 3 years. That was $18,000 accounted for. The cash withdrawals were separate. Another $15,000 missing that I couldn't trace. I texted Rebecca's number. "We need to talk about finances before we meet tomorrow. How much money have you taken from our accounts?" The response came from Kyle's phone again. "She's not discussing this over text. Talk tomorrow at 3. I called my own lawyer Monday morning. His name was Gregory Thornton, and he'd handled some contract work for me a few years ago. I explained the situation as clearly as I could while sitting in my car in the office parking lot, unable to go inside and pretend everything was normal. Gregory listened without interrupting, then asked me to come in immediately. His office was downtown in one of those buildings with marble floors and expensive art on the walls. Gregory was in his late 50s with gray hair and the kind of calm demeanor that probably came from decades of hearing people's worst days. He took notes while I went through everything again. The phone call from Kyle, the letter, the secret bank account, the emails, the cash withdrawals. When I finished, Gregory leaned back in his chair. "How long have you been married?" 7 years, together for 9. "Any prenuptial agreement?" "No. We didn't think we needed one." Gregory nodded like he'd expected that answer. "Okay. First thing we need to do is protect your assets. I'm going to file for divorce immediately before she does. In this state, whoever files first has some procedural advantages. We'll also request a temporary restraining order on all joint accounts to prevent any further withdrawals." He walked me through the process while I tried to focus through the fog in my head. Petition for dissolution of marriage, financial disclosures, asset division, spousal support, terms I'd never thought would apply to my life. "The secret account is a problem," Gregory said. "If she's been hiding money, there may be more we don't know about. I'm going to recommend we hire a forensic accountant to go through your finances, someone who can find money trails you might have missed." He gave me the name of someone named Diane Foster, who apparently specialized in finding hidden assets in divorce cases. I called her from Gregory's office and made an appointment for Wednesday. Gregory also wanted to know everything I could tell him about Kyle Brennan. If they've been planning this together, he might be more involved in the financial aspect than you think. Some of these situations, the new partner helps facilitate the asset hiding. That thought hadn't occurred to me, but it made a sick kind of sense. Kyle owned a development company. He'd know about money, about business, about how to move assets around. I left Gregory's office with a folder full of paperwork to sign and a sick feeling that this was just the beginning. The meeting with Rebecca at the coffee shop was scheduled for 3 o'clock. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat at a corner table where I could see the door. She walked in at exactly 3 o'clock, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married. Same dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Same business casual outfit she wore for client meetings. Same confident walk. Then she saw me, and her expression shifted to something guarded, and I knew I was looking at a stranger. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. "I know you're angry," she started. I cut her off. "I filed for divorce this morning. My lawyer beat you to it." Her eyes widened slightly. Good. Let her be surprised for once. "There's a restraining order on our joint accounts effective immediately. You won't be able to withdraw anything without court approval." Rebecca's composure cracked. "You can't do that. I need access to our money." "Our money. Interesting choice of words considering you've been hiding a separate account for 3 years. I watched her face go pale. "I also found the emails between you and Kyle going back 10 months, so we can skip the part where you pretend this was a recent thing." She recovered quickly, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "Those emails are private. You had no right to go through my things. They were in our shared home office, in our house that I pay the mortgage on. Nothing about our marriage has been private, apparently, so I don't feel bad about reading what you wrote to your boyfriend." The barista called out someone's order, and we both ignored it. Rebecca's jaw was tight. "I want half of everything. The house, the retirement accounts, everything. You're not entitled to half when you've been committing fraud. That secret account, the cash withdrawals, my forensic accountant is going to find every penny you've hidden, and then we're going to have a very different conversation about asset division." Rebecca stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "You're being vindictive. I'm trying to handle this like an adult." I stayed seated, keeping my voice level. An adult would have told me to my face instead of sending her boyfriend to call me from her phone. An adult wouldn't have been stealing money from joint accounts for over a year. An adult wouldn't have been lying for 10 months while planning an exit strategy. She turned and walked toward the door. I called after her. "My lawyer will be in touch about your financial disclosures. You have 30 days to provide documentation for every account in your name." She left, without looking back. I sat there for another 20 minutes, drinking water and trying to calm down. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. That wasn't necessary. She's really upset. I typed back, tell Rebecca to communicate with me through lawyers from now on, and stop texting me from her phone. He responded immediately. This is my phone. She gave you my number. I looked at the number. He was right. It wasn't Rebecca's number. It was a different one, which meant at some point during our conversation yesterday, he'd given me his personal contact information. The audacity was staggering. I blocked the number and drove home. The house felt different now. Everything looked the same, but it all felt contaminated by the knowledge of what had been happening while I was oblivious. I couldn't sleep in our bed, so I set up the guest room for myself. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Whitmore, this is Detective James Reeves with the Fraud Division. I need to ask you some questions about your wife, Rebecca Whitmore. My blood went cold. What kind of questions? Detective Reeves had a deep voice that sounded like he'd asked difficult questions for a living for a long time. We've been investigating a series of fraudulent real estate transactions, and your wife's name has come up in connection with several properties. I'd like to meet with you in person if possible. We set up a meeting for the next morning. I called Gregory Thornton immediately and told him about the call. There was a long pause. Don't say anything to the detective without me present. I'll meet you there. Detective Reeves worked out of a municipal building downtown that smelled like old coffee and institutional cleaning products. Gregory and I sat across from him in an interview room with fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly ill. Reeves was in his mid-40s with a shaved head and the kind of direct stare that probably made guilty people confess. Mr. Whitmore, thank you for coming in. I want to be clear that you're not under investigation. We're looking into your wife's professional activities, and I'm hoping you can help us understand some transactions. He pulled out a folder and spread documents across the table. Property records, sale agreements, transfer documents. All of them had Rebecca's signature as the listing agent. These properties were sold over the past 18 months. Do you recognize any of these addresses? I looked through them. I didn't recognize any of them, but that wasn't unusual. Rebecca sold houses all over the city. I'd never paid close attention to her specific listings. The buyers on these properties are all shell companies, Reeves explained. Companies that exist on paper but have no real business operations. The money for the purchases came from various sources that we're still tracing, but the pattern suggests money laundering. Gregory leaned forward. Are you saying Rebecca was involved in money laundering? Reeves pulled out another document. We're saying she was the agent of record on these sales, and the commissions she earned were substantial. Over $200,000 in the past year and a half alone. I felt like I'd been punched. $200,000 in commissions that had never appeared in our joint account. Where did that money go? I asked. Reeves slid a bank statement across the table. It was for an account I'd never seen, in Rebecca's name only, with a balance of $187,000. We found this account during our investigation. It's at a different bank than your joint accounts. Were you aware of it? I shook my head, unable to speak. Gregory picked up the statement and examined it. This is in addition to the savings account my client already discovered? I nodded. 2 secret accounts. One with $18,000 that I'd found in her files. Another with $187,000 that the police had found during a fraud investigation. Over $200,000 that Rebecca had hidden from me. Reeves continued. We have evidence that your wife was working with Kyle Brennan to facilitate these transactions. His development company would set up shell LLCs, purchase properties through those companies using money from unknown sources, then flip the properties within months for substantial profits. Your wife would handle both the purchase and the sale, earning commission on both sides. That's illegal, Gregory said. Reeves nodded. Very. It's also potentially connected to organized crime. We believe the money being laundered came from illegal gambling operations and possibly drug trafficking. We're working with the FBI on the larger investigation. I sat there trying to process this. My wife hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been committing federal crimes. Does Rebecca know you're investigating her? I asked. Reeves shook his head. Not yet. We were building our case before approaching her. But when we found out she'd left you and moved in with Kyle Brennan, we decided to reach out to you first. We're hoping you might have information that could help us. Gregory put his hand on my arm. My client is willing to cooperate fully, but we need immunity for anything he might have unknowingly been connected to through joint finances. Reeves agreed immediately. Mr. Whitmore isn't a target. We just need to know what he knows. I told them everything. The secret accounts I'd found, the emails, the cash withdrawals, the timeline of her relationship with Kyle. Everything I'd discovered in the past 72 hours. Reeves took notes and asked clarifying questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. We're going to need those emails and any other documents you found. They could be valuable evidence. Gregory negotiated terms for my cooperation. I would turn over everything I'd found. In exchange, I got full immunity and protection from any civil liability related to Rebecca's activities. Reeves also told me something that changed everything. We've been monitoring Kyle Brennan's communications. He's aware that he's under investigation. We believe he convinced your wife to leave you and move in with him as a way to control her. If she's living with him, he can make sure she doesn't talk to anyone she shouldn't. The implication hit me hard. Rebecca might think she was starting a new life with someone who loved her, but Kyle was using her to protect himself. When are you going to arrest them? I asked. Reeves exchanged a look with Gregory. We need to build a stronger case, but it could be within the next few weeks. I need you to not tell anyone about this conversation. If Rebecca or Kyle find out we're closing in, they might run. I agreed. What else could I do? I drove home with Gregory, who insisted on following me to make sure I was okay. In my driveway, he put a hand on my shoulder. This is a lot to take in. You should talk to someone. A therapist. This kind of betrayal, combined with finding out your wife is a criminal, it's traumatic. He gave me the name of a therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal. I called and made an appointment for Friday. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Rebecca living with Kyle, not knowing he was just using her to keep her quiet. Part of me wanted to warn her. Part of me wanted to watch her go down with him. Mostly I just felt numb. Diane Foster, the forensic accountant, came to my house on Wednesday with a laptop and 3 different software programs. She was in her early 50s with reading glasses on a chain and the kind of methodical energy that made me feel like everything would be documented and analyzed. I gave her access to all our financial records and sat with her while she started going through everything. This is going to take some time, she warned. But I've seen cases like this before. If she's hidden $200,000, there might be more. She found the other accounts within an hour. 3 more bank accounts in Rebecca's name only. 2 at regional banks I'd never heard of. 1 at a credit union across the state. Combined, they held another $95,000. How did I not know about these? I asked, staring at the statements on Diane's laptop screen. She probably used a different address for the statements, maybe a P.O. box or a friend's address. And if you weren't suspicious, you wouldn't have been looking. Diane kept digging. She found credit cards in Rebecca's name that I'd never known existed. The balances were all paid off, but the statements showed charges at expensive restaurants, hotels, jewelry stores, all going back over a year. She was living a completely separate life, Diane said, not unkindly. This level of deception requires planning and discipline. She knew exactly what she was doing. By the end of the day, Diane had found nearly $300,000 in hidden assets, money that should have been in our joint accounts, money that Rebecca had systematically stolen from our marriage. The good news is, we found it, Diane said, packing up her laptop. The bad news is, she's going to fight you for it in divorce court. But with this documentation, you have a very strong case for fraud. She might even face criminal charges separate from whatever the police are investigating. I sent all of Diane's findings to Gregory Thornton. He called me back within an hour. This changes everything. I'm filing an emergency motion to freeze all of her accounts. She won't be able to access any of this money until the court sorts it out. He paused. You know she's going to be furious. I didn't care anymore. Let her be furious. She'd made her choices. That Friday, I sat in Dr. Lisa Montgomery's office and tried to explain what my life had become in the span of a week. Doctor. Montgomery was in her 60s with kind eyes and a calm presence that made it feel safe to fall apart. It's normal to feel like your entire reality has shifted, she said. Because it has. The person you thought you knew doesn't exist. You're grieving that loss while also dealing with the betrayal and the criminal aspects. That's a lot for anyone to process. She gave me tools for managing the anxiety and the intrusive thoughts, breathing exercises, grounding techniques, a journal to write down everything I was feeling so it didn't just circle in my head. I left her office feeling slightly more equipped to handle whatever came next. What came next was a call from Nathan on Saturday morning. Rebecca's been arrested. I pulled over to the side of the road. What? It's all over the news. Her and Kyle Brennan. Federal charges. Fraud. Money laundering. Racketeering. It's big. I looked it up on my phone. There it was on every local news site. Local real estate agent and developer arrested in federal money laundering scheme. Rebecca's professional headshot was next to Kyle's business photo. The articles detailed the investigation, the shell companies, the illegal gambling connections. Estimated amount laundered, over $15 million. I called Detective Reeves. He answered on the first ring. I was going to call you. The FBI moved faster than we expected. They had enough evidence to make arrests this morning. What happens now? They'll be arraigned on Monday. Bail will probably be set high given the flight risk and the amounts involved. Then it's going to be a long process of trial preparation. I asked if I would have to testify. Reeves said probably, but not for months. You should know that when we arrested Rebecca, she asked to make a phone call. She called you. I checked my phone. Sure enough, there was a missed call from an unknown number around the time of her arrest. No voicemail. She wanted to know if you'd bail her out, Reeves said. I told her she should probably call a lawyer instead. The thought of Rebecca in jail should have made me feel something. Satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. Instead, I felt nothing. She was a stranger who'd destroyed my life. What happened to her now was just consequences catching up. Gregory Thornton called Monday afternoon. Rebecca was denied bail. The judge considered her a flight risk. Kyle Brennan posted bail at $500,000. He's out, but he's wearing an ankle monitor. There was more. Rebecca's lawyer had contacted Gregory about the divorce. She wanted to settle quickly and was willing to give up her claim to most of the assets in exchange for me not pursuing criminal charges for the money she'd stolen from our joint accounts. Can we do that? I asked. Gregory made a noise that might have been a laugh. She's facing federal charges. What you choose to do about the marital assets is separate. But yes, if you want to settle the divorce quickly and keep the house and the retirement accounts and everything else, she's apparently willing to sign. I thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. Do it. I want this over. The divorce was finalized in record time. 6 weeks from the day Kyle called me from Rebecca's phone to tell me she was leaving, I was legally single again. Rebecca signed over her interest in the house, the cars, the retirement accounts, everything. In exchange, I didn't press charges for the stolen money from our joint accounts. She still had to face the federal charges, but at least she wouldn't be fighting me in divorce court too. The trial was scheduled for 8 months later. I was called to testify about the hidden accounts and the timeline of Rebecca's deception. I sat in a federal courtroom and answered questions from prosecutors, while Rebecca sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered. She didn't look at me once during my testimony. Kyle Brennan's trial was separate. He'd tried to cut a deal by offering to testify against Rebecca, claiming she'd been the mastermind, but the evidence showed he'd been running the scheme long before he met her. She was just a useful accomplice with access to real estate transactions. The FBI had found emails between Kyle and organized crime figures going back years. Rebecca had gotten involved later, drawn in by the money and the excitement of it all. The prosecutor walked me through the evidence. The shell companies, the laundered money, the fake transactions. My role was just to establish that Rebecca had hidden all of this from me, that I'd had no knowledge of her criminal activities. The defense attorney tried to suggest I must have known something. How could my wife be involved in a multi-million-dollar scheme without me noticing? I looked at him directly. I trusted her. I believed what she told me. I didn't know she was capable of lying about everything. The jury deliberated for 3 days. They found Rebecca guilty on 15 counts of fraud and money laundering. Kyle Brennan was convicted on 23 counts. The sentencing hearing was 2 months later. Rebecca got 8 years in federal prison. Kyle got 15. I didn't attend the sentencing. I'd already moved on. The house was mine, and I'd renovated it completely. New paint, new furniture, new everything. I wanted no reminders of the life I'd had before. Nathan helped me pack up Rebecca's remaining belongings and donate them. We found more secrets even then. Burner phones hidden in old purses, jewelry I'd never seen her wear, cash stashed in books and coat pockets. Even after everything, she'd still managed to hide things. I started dating again about a year later. Nothing serious at first, just coffee and dinner with people I met through friends or work. I was honest about what I'd been through. Some people couldn't handle it. Others understood. I met someone eventually. Her name was Michelle, and she worked as a teacher. She'd been through her own divorce, though nothing as dramatic as mine. We took things slow, building trust carefully. On the anniversary of the day Kyle had called me, I was sitting in my renovated living room with Michelle, watching a movie. My phone buzzed with a notification, an email from Rebecca's lawyer. She was filing an appeal, claiming her trial had been unfair because I'd testified against her. The appeal would probably go nowhere, but she was trying anyway. I deleted the email without responding. Whatever Rebecca did or didn't do in prison wasn't my concern anymore. She'd made her choices. She'd chosen to cheat, to lie, to commit crimes, to destroy our marriage for money and excitement. Those choices had consequences. I'd built a new life from the wreckage she'd left behind. I had a home that was actually mine. I had friends who'd stood by me. I had a therapist who'd helped me process the trauma. I had Michelle, who looked at me with honest eyes and never made me question whether she was telling me the truth. Some nights I still thought about that phone call, the stranger's voice saying my wife wasn't coming home, how completely my world had shifted in a single moment. But I didn't regret it. That call had destroyed my life, but it had also freed me from a lie. I'd rather know the truth and deal with the pain than live in comfortable ignorance. Rebecca would be in prison for another 6 years at minimum. Kyle would be there even longer. Their scheme had collapsed. Their relationship had fallen apart under the weight of federal charges and mutual betrayal. They'd each tried to blame the other to save themselves. Meanwhile, I'd moved forward. I'd sold the development company assets that I'd somehow ended up with ownership of through the divorce settlement and asset seizures. Used the money to pay off the house completely and start a college fund for nieces and nephews. Invested in my own future instead of someone else's crimes. Dr. Montgomery told me I'd shown remarkable resilience. I didn't feel remarkable. I just felt like someone who'd survived something terrible and refused to let it define me. The scars were there. I was more cautious now, more careful about trust. But I wasn't broken. 2 years after the phone call, I married Michelle in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Nathan was my best man. We didn't have a big reception or an elaborate celebration, just people who mattered, witnessing something real. On our wedding night, Michelle asked me if I ever wondered what would have happened if Rebecca had told me the truth herself instead of sending Kyle. I thought about it. I think it would have hurt just as much, maybe more because I would have tried to save the marriage. This way, there was nothing to save. She'd already destroyed it before I even knew it was over. Michelle nodded. I'm glad she sent Kyle, because otherwise you might not be here with me. She was right. The worst day of my life had led to this. To rebuilding. To finding something better. I didn't forgive Rebecca. I didn't need to. Forgiveness was for people who deserved it, and she'd shown me exactly who she was. Someone who would sacrifice anything and anyone for money and excitement. Someone who would commit federal crimes and drag me into the investigation without a second thought. Someone who sent her criminal boyfriend to call me and announce she was leaving. That phone call had been cruel, cowardly, devastating. But it had also been honest in a way nothing else in our marriage had been. Kyle had told me the truth when Rebecca couldn't. And that truth, as painful as it was, had set me free. I got an email from the victim's advocate office a few years later. Rebecca was up for early release after serving 5 years. They wanted to know if I wanted to make a statement to the parole board. I wrote a single paragraph. Rebecca Whitmore committed crimes that affected numerous victims. She showed no remorse during her trial. She has attempted to blame others for her choices. I do not believe she should be released early. She should serve her full sentence. The parole board denied her early release. She would serve the full 8 years. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt like justice had been served, and I could close that chapter of my life completely. Michelle and I bought a house in a different neighborhood, something that had never been touched by my past. We built a life there, adopted a dog, planted a garden, had dinners with friends, did all the normal things that normal couples do. Sometimes people asked about my first marriage. I gave them the short version. My ex-wife was involved in illegal activities I didn't know about. We divorced. She went to prison. I moved on. I didn't tell them about the phone call unless they asked. And when they did ask, I told them the truth. That a stranger had called me one Saturday morning and told me my wife was leaving. That everything I'd believed about my life had been a lie. That I'd uncovered fraud and betrayal and crimes I couldn't have imagined. That I'd survived it all and come out the other side. That the phone call that destroyed my life had also saved it. Because if Rebecca had stayed, if she'd kept hiding her crimes and her affairs, eventually it all would have caught up to us anyway. The FBI would have come to our door together. I would have been implicated as a potential accomplice. My reputation would have been destroyed along with hers. Instead, Kyle's phone call had given me the separation I needed. The distance to prove I'd known nothing. The evidence to show I'd been a victim too. I'd lost a wife, but I'd kept my freedom and my future. Nathan asked me once if I'd ever confronted Rebecca after her arrest, if I'd gone to see her in prison or written her a letter demanding answers. I told him no. What would be the point? She'd given me her answer when she sent Kyle to call me, when she stole hundreds of thousands of dollars, when she chose crime and lies over our marriage. There was nothing left to say. The last time I thought about Rebecca was on my 5th wedding anniversary with Michelle. We were at dinner, celebrating, and Michelle asked me if I'd ever imagined my life would turn out this way. I looked at her across the table, this woman who'd chosen me even knowing my history, who'd been patient while I learned to trust again, who'd built something real with me. No, I said honestly, but I'm glad it did. And I meant it. The phone call from Kyle Brennan had been the worst moment of my life, but it had also been the catalyst for everything good that came after. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are the things we needed most, even if we can't see it at the time. Rebecca was released from prison after serving her full 8 years. I know because the victim's advocate office notified me. She moved to a different state, probably trying to start over somewhere no one knew her history. I didn't follow her story, didn't check her social media, or ask mutual acquaintances about her. She was a part of my past that I'd made peace with and moved beyond. Kyle Brennan served 10 years before getting released on parole. His development company had been seized and liquidated. His reputation was destroyed. Last I heard, he was working construction for someone else's company, living in a small apartment, trying to rebuild a life from nothing. They deserved each other, in the end. 2 people who chose crime and selfishness over everything else. 2 people who destroyed lives in pursuit of money and excitement. 2 people who paid the price for their choices. As for me, I built something better. A marriage based on honesty, a home filled with trust, a life I didn't have to lie about or hide. And whenever I tell the story now, I tell it all. The phone call, the secrets, the crimes, the trial, the rebuilding. Because it's a reminder that sometimes the worst day of your life is the day everything changes for the better. You just have to survive it first. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.